Police sirens pierced through the cold, damp night. On an empty street in the city of Monroe, red and blue lights flashed against the wet pavement, turning raindrops into blades of glassy light. A black SUV had just pulled over. Inside, a middle-aged woman placed both hands on the steering wheel, her voice low and calm. I wasn't speeding, but the officer outside didn't hear her, or perhaps chose not to. He walked forward, flashlight beaming straight into her eyes, as if trying to see through her skin, through her veins. Deputy Carl Mason, 38 years old, the square-jawed face of a man who believed power lived in the gun on his hip. He had just finished a 12-hour shift, exhausted, irritable, looking for somewhere to unload his anger. The woman appeared at the wrong time. License and registration, he said, his cold voice slicing through the rain. The woman, dressed in a gray blouse, a thin silver bracelet on her wrist, slowly reached for her handbag. Mason snapped, "Hands on your head! I said hands on your head!" The flashlight trembled. She looked up, meeting his gaze, calm to the point of frightening. "I'm just getting my wallet." "Shut up," he barked. Metal clinked, the grip of his gun brushed against his belt. The rain grew heavier. And in a single breath, violence erupted. Carl Mason yanked open the car door, dragging the woman out of the driver's seat. She didn't resist, only managed to say, "You might have the wrong person," before her shoulder slammed against the car. A young man about 30 feet away stood trembling, phone in hand, recording. Marcus Ellis, a law student, had been passing by. "She didn't do anything," he shouted. Mason spun around, yelling, "Back off or you'll be next." When he turned back, rage burned in his eyes. He forced the woman to the ground, his knee pressing hard into her back. Her breathing grew shallow. "Stop it!" Marcus cried out. "She can't breathe." Rain mixed with gasping breath. The woman's face was pressed to the cold asphalt, blood seeping from her lip. A weak cough escaped, then silence. Mason hissed between his teeth, "Resisting arrest! Go ahead, record it. Let everyone see what happens when you don't obey." A sharp metallic click. The handcuffs locked. The police lights flashed like a grotesque performance. She no longer moved, only her lips quivering, whispering words no one could hear. Marcus's hands shook as he called for help. When the ambulance arrived, 2 paramedics knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. "Ma'am, can you hear me? What's your name?" One gently lifted her coat, revealing a brown leather ID case with an embossed seal of the Department of Justice. They exchanged a stunned glance. Printed clearly beneath the photo were the words, "Helena Brooks, Attorney General of the United States." No one spoke. One paramedic muttered under his breath, "Oh my God." Mason froze, eyes blank. Marcus stumbled backward, heart pounding. He knew in that moment the city would never be the same. They lifted Helena onto the stretcher, the ambulance siren wailing through the rain, sharp and relentless like the trumpet announcing a political storm. On the way to the hospital, the light inside the ambulance cast faint shadows over Helena's face. Her eyes were closed, but the strength in her features remained. In her fading consciousness, she heard her father's voice. "Justice only means something when it's defended, even when the defender is trampled." Her weak breath merged with the siren's cry. Outside the city of Monroe still slept, unaware that within hours the video Marcus recorded would spread across the nation, and America would awaken to outrage over a woman seemingly ordinary who had been struck down in the dark, though she was the head of justice itself. In a small house on the south side of the city, Naomi Brooks, Helena's daughter, saw the video the next morning. The coffee cup slipped from her hand, her fingers trembling. Her mother, the woman she'd always believed untouchable, lay motionless on the ground beneath the knee of a local cop. Outside, the Monroe sun was rising its rays cutting through the window and falling across the framed photo of her mother on the wall, the words beneath it gleaming. Still, justice is not mercy. It's responsibility. And Naomi knew from that moment on her mother's fight was no longer just about the law. It was about the soul of an entire nation. The steady sound of a ventilator filled the stark white hospital room. Cold fluorescent light fell over Helena Brooks's bruised face. An IV line ran down her arm, connecting her to a fragile thread of life. Outside the glass window, 2 security guards whispered to each other. One said, "Heard she's the Attorney General." The other replied softly, "God, Mason's done for then." Inside, the only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and Helena's heavy breathing. The door opened. Pastor Evelyn Moore, her silver hair framing bright, steady eyes, walked in with Naomi, Helena's daughter. Naomi gripped her mother's hand, her voice trembling. "Mom, it's me!" "Naomi." Helena's eyelids fluttered her gaze, half conscious, half lost the last image in her mind. Still that twisted face of Mason leaning over her. Evelyn rested a firm, gentle hand on Naomi's shoulder. "Don't cry, child. A woman like her doesn't fall that easily." Out in the corridor, Chief Reed Hollister, the Monroe police chief, waited surrounded by a cluster of reporters pressing forward. He tugged at his tie, sweat glistening on his temples. The press conference was only hours away, and he needed to control the narrative. One advisor whispered the clip hit 2 million views in 3 hours. "City Hall wants you to issue an apology," Hollister muttered through clenched teeth. "Apologize for a misunderstanding." "Not a chance. I'll say the investigation is ongoing." But behind his eyes, something flickered, the uneasy tremor of a man sensing a storm rising. Upstairs, Marcus Ellis sat with a federal investigator. He recounted every detail, the shouting Mason's movements, Helena's collapse. "I have the original clip on my phone," he said hoarsely, voice raw from sleeplessness. "They'll try to edit it, I know." The investigator nodded, scribbling quickly. "We'll protect you, Marcus. You didn't just save one life, you might have saved the whole system." Marcus said nothing. In his mind, the sound of those handcuffs still echoed, mingled with guilt that he hadn't done more than record. By noon, Helen awoke. She looked around disoriented by the unfamiliar room. Naomi burst into tears and hugged her. But Helena only whispered, "Don't cry, my daughter. We still have work to do." Her voice was hoarse, but her eyes were fierce with purpose. Pastor Evelyn stepped closer, taking her hand. "The world is watching you, Helena. The moment to hold them accountable has come." Helena closed her eyes, her breathing slowing, her thoughts drifting to her father's face, the prosecutor who once told her that justice doesn't come from promises, but from proof. Now she herself was the proof. Meanwhile, at the Monroe Police Department, Mason sat in a holding room, head bowed. He'd been suspended, but still believed the department would protect him. The union lawyer patted his shoulder. "Don't worry. They'll say she attacked first. There's footage. We can reframe it that way." Mason gave a dry laugh. "All for the honor of the badge, right?" But in his eyes, fear flickered. He had never struck someone this powerful, and for the first time he realized the game was far beyond his control. By evening, the hospital was crowded. Reporters, worshippers, and citizens gathered outside banners stretched across the rain-slicked streets. Justice for Helena. Justice for all. A fine drizzle began to fall, the droplets catching the lights, forming a shimmering veil like smoke. Inside, Naomi scrolled through her phone, reading aloud the comments from the public. "The whole nation is waiting for you to speak, Mom." Helena gave a faint smile. "They'll have their answer." That night she requested to see Agent Rosa Valdez, a former colleague from the Department of Justice. When Rosa entered, Helena was still weak, but her voice was sharp as steel. "I want to reopen Project Radiant." Rosa stared at her in disbelief. "That police reform program was shut down 5 years ago, Helena. Congress never approved the funding." "I don't need funding," Helena replied. "I need data. A list of those who defended this system with their blood and those who exploited it." Her tone was low, yet the force of her words seemed to pull the air from the room. Naomi stood quietly in the corner, fear and pride intertwining in her chest. The woman lying there was not just her mother, but the symbol of a fractured nation. Helena turned to her daughter. "Naomi, tell the people we are not afraid. We will rise again not just for ourselves, but for everyone who was ever forced into silence." Naomi nodded, tears streaming down her face, but a smile breaking through. She understood her mother had just declared the beginning of a battle Monroe City had never seen before, a battle between justice and the darkness hiding beneath the blue of the badge. The sky over Monroe hung thick and gray clouds pressing low, as if ready to unleash the fury of an entire city. City Hall blazed with light reporters crowding the gates, microphones, and cameras, standing shoulder to shoulder like a forest of lenses. Inside the press room, Police Chief Reed Hollister wiped sweat from his brow, forcing a calm expression. "The matter is under investigation. We confirm there was no racial element involved in the incident with Mrs. Helena Brooks." His statement echoed across dozens of news channels, but outside hundreds of voices roared in unison. No more lies. Helena sat in a wheelchair just discharged from the hospital flashes bursting across her bruised face. She said nothing, only narrowed her eyes toward the building where power hid behind polished words. Naomi pushed her quietly, a shadow beside her. As they passed, the crowd fell silent. Only the patter of rain remained on the pavement. A middle-aged woman lifted a sign, high. "Justice for Helena. Justice for all." Helena looked up, her gaze softening. "The people are waking up," she murmured. That night in a small apartment on Adams Avenue, Helena opened her old laptop and signed in with a double-layer password. A file appeared, code named Blue Circle. Red text flashed on the screen, access restricted, classified. She entered a special clearance code, and the screen shifted color. Dozens of internal records appeared, lists of officers receiving money from oil corporations, missing person files, investigation terminations. Beside her, Rosa Valdez held a cup of coffee, reading each line slowly, her eyes darkening. "My God," she whispered. "They covered up deaths in custody?" Helena nodded. "This is what I've been tracking for 2 years. Mason was just a small link. Blue Circle is an entire network." Outside, the rain hammered the windows. Naomi entered, holding her phone. Mom Marcus's video just hit 5 million views. Activist groups are converging on Monroe. Helena looked at her daughter, pride and concern blending in her eyes. "Show them what's really happening, but promise me don't let anyone get close to you." Naomi gripped her mother's hand. "I'm not afraid. They fear the light, not us." Meanwhile, in the basement of the police department, Mason sat in the dark, cigarette trembling between his fingers. A man in a gray suit stepped in, Mayor Franklin Doyle. He gave a weary smile. "I told you to stay out of trouble, Carl. Now the whole city's on fire." Mason let out a dry laugh. I was just doing my job. How was I supposed to know she runs the Department of Justice? Doyle tossed a thick envelope onto the table. Leave town for a few days. Someone will handle the rest. Mason raised an eyebrow. You mean cover it up? Doyle replied curtly. Call it clean up. He turned and left the cold scent of smoke lingering in the air. Across town, Marcus Ellis had just returned to his apartment. He opened his laptop, uploading the original video backup. The screen flashed upload complete when his phone rang. A husky female voice came through. Mr. Ellis, this is Agent Valdez. You need to leave immediately. A fake search warrant was signed this morning. He barely had time to react before loud knocks pounded on his door. Through the peephole, he saw two plainclothes officers, one holding an envelope. Marcus quickly pulled out the hard drive and shoved it into the microwave, the only place he thought they wouldn't look. That night, Helena received a call from Rosa. Marcus is being followed. I'm getting him out of Monroe. Helena paused before replying, Good. Keep a backup of the data safe. If they come after him, I want the whole country to know. Her voice was raspy but steady. Rosa understood the Attorney General was no longer fighting for herself. She was preparing for a counterattack. The next morning, the state's largest newspaper ran the headline, Attorney General Brooks to reopen federal police reform initiative. Reactions erupted, some in support, others in outrage. Conservative networks branded her a traitor to law enforcement. But at St. Hope Church, Pastor Evelyn preached before hundreds. Faith does not lie in a gun or a badge. It lies in the courage to defend what is right even against power itself. The crowd rose, applause thundering. In a small office behind the church, Helena met with Evelyn and Rosa. She spread a map of Monroe across the table, marking 3 red dots, 3 secret blue circle facilities, a records warehouse, a surveillance hub, and a shell law office. We start here, she said. I don't need Congress, I don't need funding, I just need the truth. Evelyn clasped her hand and smiled. You won't be alone. The congregation will pray and act. That afternoon, as Helena's car rolled through downtown crowds, lifted banners, demanding transparency. At the corner, Marcus reappeared, safe but weary, quietly blending into the march. On the rooftop of a nearby building, a camera lens pointed toward them, a tiny red light blinking through the rain. The fight had gone beyond law. It had become a battle between darkness and light, and Helena knew the storm had only just begun. The next morning, thick fog settled over Monroe's old neighborhood, the smell of damp exhaust and cold hanging heavy in the air. Pastor Evelyn was getting ready for the prayer service when the church phone rang, frantic, a man's panicked voice shouting, St. Hope is on fire! She dropped her Bible and ran outside canvas shoes, soaking in the dew. From down the street, a column of black smoke rose, orange flames licking the early sky like a bright wound. Helena Brooks arrived within 10 minutes. The scene froze her in place, shattered glass at the entrance. The church's dome half collapsed, and scrawled across the singed wall, someone had painted in blue letters, Blue stays blue. The fire wasn't large enough to get out of control, but it was enough to send a clear message, Don't touch us. Naomi ran forward and hugged her mother voice, choking. They're trying to intimidate us. Helena smoothed her daughter's hair. No, child. They just confessed. Through the smoke, a figure appeared, Marcus Ellis, jacket-drenched phone in hand, filming the scene. He spoke quietly. This isn't just arson. This is a declaration of war. Helena looked at him, eyes calm and blade sharp. Then we will answer. That evening, in the church's temporary room, a circle gathered. Rosa Valdez, Pastor, Evelyn Marcus, and Naomi Candlelight flickering on their faces. Helena stood in the center and set a stack of files on the table. Project Radiant is officially relaunched. Silence fell. This is the National Police Reform Plan I once drafted, but this time we will not wait for Congress. We start in Monroe. Rosa frowned. Without federal protection, you will be in danger. Helena answered plainly. They choke me in the street. What more can they do? At the same time, in a suburban bar, Deputy Carl Mason sat with two other officers smoking voice rough. We have to ruin her reputation. A black woman running the Department of Justice makes a lot of people uncomfortable. The red-headed cop beside him sneered, easy. A doctored video will do. People believe what they want to believe. Mason nodded, flicking ash into his beer. I have someone handling that. After tonight, everyone will think Helena Brooks attacked the officers. In Naomi's apartment, the computer's blue glow lit her face as she scrolled through thousands of social comments, some supporting her mother most inflamed by fake news. Beneath a doctored clip, the cold headline read, "She attacked first." Naomi slammed her keyboard, tears falling. Helena came up behind her, hand on her shoulder. Don't let anger make you lose the objective. Truth has a way of speaking. Naomi turned, voice shaking. But they're making you the villain. Helena looked straight into her daughter's eyes. Justice does not need to be loved, my child. It only needs to be carried out. That night, Helena drove to meet Rosa at the DOJ's temporary office. They sat across from each other, walls plastered with maps and photos. Rosa opened a new file. We traced Blue Circle's money. It all leads to the private security firm Helios Guard. And guess who the largest shareholder is? Helena raised an eyebrow. Franklin Doyle. Rosa nodded. Mayor Doyle of Monroe is not just complicit, he runs the network. Helena sighed, a thin smile crossing her face. I suppose he won't confess. Then we will give him cause to speak. That same night, Pastor Evelyn held a prayer vigil amid the church's smoldering ruins. Residents of Monroe came bearing candles, the tiny lights joining into a gentle sea of flame against the dark. Standing on the cracked steps, her voice ringing out, she said, "We will not answer hate with hate. We will answer with action and truth." At the back of the crowd, Marcus held his phone, high-streaming live Pastor Evelyn in the rain, drawing hundreds of thousands of viewers online. The caption read, "Light the Justice," and it became the city's new slogan. By dawn, a movement began to form. Students, teachers, workers, writing petitions demanding the investigation be reopened. Signs reading, "No more silence," appearing on every corner. In City Hall, Mayor Doyle stared out the window, his face drained. "She's turning the whole city against us," he told an aide. "No," the aide replied. "She's reminding the city of conscience." Doyle clenched his fist. "Then we will extinguish that conscience before it spreads statewide." That afternoon, Helena watched the latest live stream candlelight reflected on Pastor Evelyn's face, on the tears of the crowd, on Marcus's trembling smile. She smiled faintly. "They have lit the fire," she murmured now. "It's time to let it burn." In the red glow of the setting sun, the Attorney General began drafting a plan called Operation Dawnlight, a counteroffensive meant to leave nowhere for those hiding behind the blue badge to hide. Rain fell over Monroe all morning, heavy drops striking the pavement as if trying to wash away the tension spreading through the city. In the basement of an old building, dim yellow light glowed against a wall-sized map. Helena Brooks stood upright, a red marker in her hand, circling 3 locations. Her voice was calm but firm. "We start here. An abandoned police station, a data warehouse, and a fake Blue Circle office. Each place holds a piece of the truth. Rosa Valdez flipped through her notebook, reading quickly. I can send in an investigative team, but if they're caught, it'll be labeled a jurisdictional breach. Helena's tone was cold, unwavering. They broke the law first, Rosa. They put their hands around my throat in the middle of the street. If justice has been bent, then we must set it straight. Her words cut through the air with such finality that no one spoke. Naomi stood behind her mother, eyes wide with admiration and worry. She knew Helena was stepping into a place beyond protection, where law no longer shielded anyone. Marcus Ellis, the youngest of the group, set his laptop on the table. I decrypted the hard drive Liam, the young officer, sent before he was killed. The data matches Mayor Doyle's bank accounts. He's been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from Helios Guard every month. Helena's eyes softened with grief. He died for this. We won't let his sacrifice be in vain. Pastor Evelyn bowed her head and prayed, may God protect us from the darkness of those who claim to serve the light. That night, the rain stopped, leaving behind a purple sky and slick, whispering streets. Helena arranged to meet someone at an abandoned parking lot in the city's south end. A rusted truck sat in the dark headlights, flashing twice the signal for safety. The man who stepped out was Officer Liam Price, his eyes uneasy. I've heard about you, about what you're doing, he said softly, and I want to help. I can plant a recorder at the poker meeting tonight. Helena nodded, her voice low and steady. You understand the risk. Liam forced a smile. I'm a cop, but I'm also human. I'm tired of pretending I don't see. The scene cut to a suburban house where Mason and his crew gathered, laughter mixing with the smell of beer and smoke. Doyle just sent our bonus, Mason bragged, waving a stack of cash. She's about to be destroyed by the media. The fake clip airs tonight. Once the public loses faith, no one will listen to her again. One of the men asked, and if she still doesn't shut up? Mason shrugged. Accidents happen every day. Who's going to question a failed robbery? As he spoke, Liam sat in the corner, head bowed, gripping the recorder, hidden in his jacket. 2 hours later, at Helena's apartment, Marcus received the signal from the device. Static filled the speakers, then Mason's voice came through clear as glass. We keep order through fear. Without fear, they forget their place. Marcus looked up tense. This is undeniable evidence. Helena nodded, a thin smile forming. And our first indictment. Behind her, Rosa immediately sent the data to a secure server. But less than 2 hours later, Liam called, his voice shaking. They're on to me. I have to get out. Then the line went dead. Helena tried to reach him again and again, but no response. Near midnight, police found Liam's car by the Black Ridge Bridge door, open driver's seat, stained with blood. There was no body, only a broken badge and a message, scrawled in marker, "Stay silent." News of Liam's death spread fast, igniting outrage across the community. St. Hope Church filled with people holding candles in the dark. Pastor Evelyn stood in the circle of light and declared, "He did not die in vain. His death will shine upon the truth." Outside, hundreds chanted justice for Liam, justice for the man who dared to speak. Helena watched the broadcast, her heart torn between grief and resolve. They think killing one man erases the evidence, she told Rosa. But they forget I'm still alive. She turned to Naomi. Get ready. Tomorrow morning we go public. At dawn, the press conference took place at the temporary State Department of Justice office. Helena stepped to the podium, bruises still marking her neck, her voice hoarse but strong. It's time to talk about the truth, not just mine, but the truth of every citizen who has been bullied, silenced, or forgotten. The room fell silent. On the large screen behind her, she played the recording from poker night. Mason's voice echoed every word, landing like a hammer blow. Before the cameras, Helena lifted her head high. Justice is never a gift. It is a price we pay with courage. Below the stage, Rosa gripped Marcus's hand while Naomi watched her mother, eyes shining. In that moment, all of Monroe seemed to hold its breath, and those who once believed themselves untouchable began to taste for the first time the flavor of fear. That night, television lights illuminated the entire city. Helena Brooks's face appeared on every news broadcast. Her eyes shadowed, but clear, her hoarse voice echoing across millions of screens. We cannot continue living in a country where justice belongs only to those with a badge. Every citizen deserves the same respect they give to the law. The nation split into one side, hailing her as a symbol of courage, the other condemning her for turning against law enforcement. In Monroe, a dangerous silence crept into every corner. Inside Mayor Franklin Doyle's office, the lights stayed on all night. He sat by the window, cigar in hand, the red ember reflecting off his tense face. "She's burning everything I built," Doyle muttered. The man in the gray suit across from him replied, "Don't worry. The fake video has spread. We just need one more strike to make the public believe Helena Brooks is manipulating the media." Doyle crushed the cigar into an ashtray, eyes darkening. "If necessary, I'll silence her permanently." The next morning, as Helena prepared for the federal hearing, Rosa Valdez's phone rang, her voice tense. "Helena, the backup data's been deleted from the server. Someone breached the system at 3 a.m., and Liam, he's still missing." Helena froze, closing her eyes for a few seconds. "They're clearing the field for retaliation," she said quietly. "But we'll move first." She left her office and stepped into the elevator with Naomi and Marcus. The overhead lights reflected off the fading bruises around her neck. Naomi looked at her mother anxiously. "You can't keep fighting them alone like this?" Helena smiled faintly, her tones soft yet unyielding. "I'm not alone, my dear. I have you, I have Rosa, and I have a city that's starting to wake up. Justice doesn't need a savior, it needs people brave enough to stand." As they reached the ground floor, the phone rang again. It was Rosa. "Helena, get out of the building." Now her voice shouted over sirens. "Armed police are coming. They have a warrant for your arrest, obstruction of justice." Helena stood still, then laughed quietly. "Perfect. They're afraid." She took Naomi's hand. "Back exit. Marcus, get the car." The three sprinted through a narrow alley behind the building. Rain poured, suddenly cold drops slashing across their faces as sirens wailed in the distance. When they reached the car, Helena looked back at the Department of Justice building. Red and blue lights flashed across the windows, just like the night she was attacked. A circle had closed, but this time she wasn't the victim. Rosa met them on the outskirts of town, in a run-down wooden house near the edge of the forest. On the table lay soaked folders, rainwater dripping from their edges. "Doyle just signed your temporary suspension," Rosa said. "They're using it to justify destroying evidence." Helena sat down, wiping her face with a damp towel. "And Blue Circle?" she asked. "They're already clearing out," Rosa replied. "I tracked 3 trucks leaving Helios's storage facility before dawn." Helena narrowed her eyes. "That means by tonight they'll erase everything." Marcus opened his laptop, projecting satellite images. "We tracked one of the trucks stopping in the East Industrial Zone near Warehouse 17. Helena stared at the screen, determination gleaming in her eyes. Then that's where we go. This time not just to gather evidence, but to end it all. Night fell wind howling through leafless trees. Helena wore a black coat, earpiece, in place her voice steady over the radio. Rosa, is the location secured? Yes, Rosa answered. But be careful, they're armed. Marcus adjusted the small body camera on his chest. We're recording Madam Attorney General. Helena smiled, calm and cold. Good. They love to display power. Let's expose it to the light. The warehouse doors creaked open, footsteps echoing through the metal hall. Inside, rows of file crates stood stacked high, each stamped Helios Guard Confidential. Flashlights swept over bundles of cash and documents naming officers on the payroll. My God, Marcus whispered. Helena knelt and opened an envelope, revealing wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. This is the heart of Blue Circle, she said. They built this empire on innocent blood. A loud clang came from behind them. Mason entered with 2 men. Didn't you learn your lesson? He growled. This time, there's no one to record it. Helena rose, facing him without flinching. I survived you once, Mason. This time, the whole world is watching. As he drew his gun, headlights burst through the windows. Rosa's voice thundered through a loudspeaker. FBI. Drop your weapons. Chaos erupted. Mason spun around, but it was too late. Agents in tactical gear flooded the room, guns drawn. Amid the commotion, Helena stood still, wind whipping her hair, her voice ringing like a verdict. Justice never dies, Mason. It only waits for someone brave enough to call its name. When the handcuffs snapped shut, Mason lowered his head, eyes burning with hatred. But in Helena's gaze, there was only cold calm. On the drive back, dawn broke. Naomi sat beside her mother, clutching her hand. Do you think this is the end? She asked, softly. Helena looked out the window where the first light of morning pierced through the clouds. No, my dear, she said quietly. This is only the beginning. When darkness is dragged into the light, it thrashes harder than ever before. Somewhere in the awakening city of Monroe, Mayor Doyle watched the broadcast showing Mason's arrest. He hurled his glass against the wall, the liquid splattering like blood. In the mirror, his reflection stared back, half power, half corruption. He whispered, If it's war, you want Helena Brooks, then war you shall have. Late in the afternoon, the sky over Monroe turned a burnished copper wind, scraping harshly through the dry trees. On the evening news, the anchor spoke in an urgent tone, following the raid at warehouse. 17 dozens of officers have been arrested, but internal sources report that several sensitive documents remain missing. Mayor Franklin Doyle has yet to comment. On the other side of the screen, in a small wooden house on the outskirts, Helena Brooks switched off the television. She sat silently for a few seconds, her eyes fixed on the small flame flickering in the fireplace. They're not finished yet, she murmured. When power is threatened, it always strikes back. Naomi sat nearby, her arms wrapped around her knees. Mom, how many people like Mason are still out there? Helena gave a faint, tired smile, dark circles under her eyes. More than you think. But the more shadows there are, the more people will rise when light reaches them. Marcus and Rosa entered, carrying folders still damp from the rain. We recovered Mason's notebook, Marcus said. It contains records of secret payments. Every transaction went through the police pension fund. If we can prove dirty money moved through it, the entire Blue Circle will lose its lifeline. Helena lifted her head, a glint sparking in her eyes. That's their weak point. She rose, pen in hand, circling the numbers. We don't need to arrest them again. We just cut off the money. When the money stops, the empire collapses. Rosa scribbled notes quickly. I can request an order to freeze the fund temporarily, but it needs a judge's signature to be legal. Helena nodded. I know someone who'll do it. That night, she visited Judge Annalise Carver, the elderly jurist who had once worked alongside her father. The room smelled of old paper, a desk lamp casting a golden glow on the judge's wrinkled but sharp face. Helena, Judge Carver said, you're touching the most dangerous thing of all the police pension fund. They'll see this as a declaration of war. Helena answered slowly, war is what they started. I'm only returning the truth. After a brief silence, Judge Carver set her pen to paper. I'll sign, she said, but be careful. When people fear losing privilege, they become more savage than criminals. The news of the fund's freeze spread like wildfire. Officers loyal to Blue Circle erupted in anger, staging protests and blaming Helena. They called her the traitor in a suit. In Monroe, tension hit a breaking point. One night, as Helena left her temporary office, her car was cut off by an SUV. 3 men stepped out, faces covered with black scarves. Withdraw that order, Brooks one growled. She opened her door and stepped out calmly, her voice low and firm. If you came to threaten me, you chose the wrong person. Before the man could respond, headlights flared behind them, Rosa's car with 2 agents inside. The men fled, leaving a white envelope on the wet street. Inside was a photograph of Naomi taken secretly through her dorm window. Helena crushed it in her fist eyes, turning to steel. So, they've decided to go after my family. The next morning, she convened an emergency meeting with her closest allies at St. Hope Church, now rebuilt with a wooden frame. Pastor Evelyn sat at the head of the table, rosary clutched in her hand. They're losing control, Helena. When darkness knows it's dying, it fights back harder. Helena looked around at the familiar faces glowing in the dim light. That's why we move faster, she said. I want to launch Operation Dawnlight at sunrise. We'll release every record of Blue Circle's illegal assets, Marcus asked. What about backlash from the police union? Helena replied without hesitation. Let them rage. Every shout they make will only make the truth louder. Later that afternoon, as she left the church, Helena stopped in front of the charred wall, still bearing the blue graffiti, "Blue stays blue." She uncapped her red marker and wrote 2 words beneath it, "Not anymore." Then she walked away, her black coat billowing in the wind, like a final, period-ending fear itself. At the same time, inside the mayor's office, Doyle slammed the news report onto his desk, shouting, "She froze the pension fund. This city will riot." A man standing in the corner spoke quietly, "Sir Mason's in custody. And, as of now, there's no proof against you." Doyle smirked. "If there isn't, we'll make some." He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Prepare the new video. This time make her look like a traitor to the country. I want this game over." That night, Naomi received an anonymous message. "If you want your mother to live, don't go to the press conference tomorrow." She kept it from Helena, but her anxious eyes didn't go unnoticed. Helena looked at her gently. "Don't be afraid. They win when we stay silent." Naomi's voice trembled. "But you'll lose everything." Helena placed her hand over her daughter's heart. "No one loses anything when fighting for justice. We're only reclaiming what was always ours." The next morning, the press conference drew hundreds of reporters. Helena wore a black suit, a white scarf around her neck, hiding the fading bruise. As she stepped onto the podium, the wind caught her hair, and for a moment she looked like a living emblem. Her voice carried across the crowd, clear and deliberate. Today we reveal an undeniable truth. The Monroe Police Pension Fund has been used to launder money. From this moment on, every transfer will be publicly monitored. No one, not even those in uniform, stands above the law. Outside, the crowd erupted cheers mixed with jeers, but when Helena looked down, she saw Naomi in the front row, her eyes shining. That look told Helena there was no turning back, and she no longer needed to. Justice was no longer a slogan. It had a face, a heartbeat, and the courage of real people who dared to speak. That afternoon, Doyle received an emergency alert, the pension fund accounts completely frozen. He hurled his whiskey glass to the floor, shouting, "Pull the strings!" All of them. And in the dark of his office, he turned to his aides and ordered coldly, "Prepare Plan B. If she won't disappear, we'll burn Monroe to the ground." That night, the city seemed to hold its breath. Cold wind swept through the wet streets, carrying the faint scent of exhaust from patrol cars idling by the curbs. News that the police pension fund had been frozen burned like a spark in the hearts of those who once believed themselves untouchable. From gleaming offices to dimly lit bars, new conspiracies began to form, whispered between cautious voices and hidden phone calls. On the rooftop of a northern high-rise, Mayor Franklin Doyle stood overlooking the city, lights eyes red, his face distorted with panic. He clutched his phone, voice trembling. "You can't let this all fall on me. What do we do? Give me a way out." On the other end, a low, steady male voice replied coldly, "You lit the fire, Franklin. Now you'll be the one to put it out. We have a plan B, but it's going to get dirty." Doyle swallowed hard, staring down at the streets below. Inside him, fear began to grow, not fear of losing power, but of losing the reputation that had kept him alive this long. Meanwhile, Helena sat inside her temporary office at St. Hope Church, surrounded by damp folders. The desk lamp cast a sharp glow on every number and every line of notes. Beside her, Rosa opened a new envelope and handed her a printed ledger showing shell companies' offshore accounts and the names of major contributors. Each name was a fragment of guilt. Helena placed her hand over the paper, as if gripping the heart of justice itself. "We have 80 suspicious transfers over 2 years from small sums to amounts large enough to fund an empire." Her voice was cold, but steady. Naomi stood by the window, watching small groups of people gathered outside, murmuring in low tones. She sighed. "Mom, they've started turning their attention to me." Helena turned toward her, her eyes both soft and firm. "No one points at our family with fear. We defend ourselves with truth." Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle like armor. She understood that from this moment her choices were no longer about family alone. They were about history. Before dawn, a group of masked men slipped into the Helios Guard storage facility. They moved quickly, gathering boxes of documents, wrapping them in tarp, loading them into trucks. The mastermind behind it wanted no trace left behind. But a small glitch left a clue. A flicker on a security camera capturing the faint outline of a truck with an unusual symbol on its tailgate. When Marcus analyzed the satellite footage, his pulse quickened. The truck led to a different warehouse, one registered under the name of a councilman's relative. The memory of Liam Price, the officer who had sacrificed himself to warn them, lingered in everyone's mind. His ghost stood as a reminder that truth often demanded life as its price. Pastor Evelyn held a midnight vigil for Liam's soul. Hundreds of candles flickered faces glowing in their light as she raised her voice over the crowd. They want us to bow our heads, but bowing saves no one. Stand up with faith and action. Her words were like a trumpet, stirring weary hearts back to courage. The opposition did not stay silent. Tabloids, under coordinated orders, unleashed a wave of smear articles accusing Helena of abusing power, of manipulating the media to destroy her enemies. A doctored video emerged showing what seemed to be Helena coercing a judge. Social media exploded, half condemning, half defending her. Once again, truth stood beside lies in the chaos of information, but Helena and her team refused to be swayed. They knew this battle wasn't just about evidence, it was about public trust. Marcus hosted live broadcasts explaining every document, every signature, every transfer. Rosa reached out to national investigative journalists and independent legal organizations, inviting them to Monroe to verify everything firsthand. Naomi traveled to universities organizing forums and rallies, urging students and young citizens to join in public oversight. Each action was an arrow fired straight into the armor of corruption. One night, when Helena returned home, the back wall of her house was plastered with posters reading, "Justice over fear." But among them, one small paper stood out crooked and torn at the corner. 3 black words scrawled across it. "Stop. Now." Helena stared at it, lips pressed tight. Fear didn't reach her only clarity. She tore the note into shreds and tossed them into the fireplace. The ashes rose into the air, merging with her thoughts that if no one stood up, the darkness would win. The political storm raged on, and Monroe became a mirror for the entire nation. Each press conference, each recording, each poster built another stone on the path toward what was coming, the public trial, where those who had worn badges as shields would finally face judgment. But Helena knew victory in court would still demand sleepless nights, blood, and sometimes tears. She closed her eyes as a soft knock came at the door, Naomi fatigue written across her face. Helena smiled not with joy, but with unwavering resolve. Tomorrow, she whispered, we bring everything into the light. They'll have nowhere left to hide. And in the darkness, the small oil lamp of Saint. Hope burned faintly proof that wherever courage exists, the light can never be fully extinguished. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the Monroe Federal Courthouse. Hundreds of people gathered in the square outside, holding signs that read, "Truth for all and justice lives here." Inside, Helena Brooks entered the courtroom with calm composure, dressed in a black suit and a white scarf draped around her neck. At the front sat Mayor Franklin Doyle, his face drained of color, hands clasped tightly on the table as he tried to maintain a facade of confidence. Behind him, a long row of police officers and public officials who had aided his schemes sat with their heads bowed, faces pale and hollow. The trial began. Judge Carver, her silver hair gleaming under the light, read the charges in a voice as sharp as steel: money laundering, destruction of evidence, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. Each word fell like the strike of a hammer in the heavy air. Rosa presented the evidence bank statements, transfer records, the recordings of Mason and Doyle. When Mason's voice echoed through the speaker, "Without fear, they'll forget their place," the crowd outside erupted in furious cheers. Doyle leapt to his feet, shouting, She framed me. This is a political vendetta. Helena looked at him with steady eyes, calm yet cutting like a blade. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. You trapped yourself with your own greed. I merely opened the door for the light to enter. The room fell completely silent. The lights reflected off her face, cold, resolute, and proud. When the verdict was announced, 25 years in prison for Doyle, 10 years for his accomplices, and the dissolution of Helios Guard, the square outside exploded with joy. People embraced one another through tears. Pastor Evelyn fell to her knees in prayer, and Naomi, standing among the crowd, looked toward her mother with shining eyes. You did it, Mom. Helena shook her head gently. No, my daughter, we did it. Outside, the clouds slowly dispersed, and Monroe's sky turned a clear blue untouched by the smoke that had once darkened it. Signs waved high above the crowd, hundreds of hands clasped together. Helena stepped out of the courthouse into a sea of cameras and flashing lights. She lifted her head and took a deep breath, feeling the air of freedom. A soft wind swept through, carrying with it the sound of St. Hope's church bells, ringing in long, steady tones like a farewell to the past and a welcome to a new era, one where justice was no longer a distant dream, but the very breath of Monroe itself. The sky over Monroe that day was crystal clear. Sunlight poured across the steps of the federal courthouse, where crowds still lingered after the verdict. As Mayor Franklin Doyle was led away in handcuffs, the sound of cheers mingled with tears of relief. Helena Brooks stood quietly at the top of the steps, looking down at the sea of people holding signs that read, "Truth for All." She gave a small nod, then turned away. The battle she had started did not end in that courtroom. It had only opened a new chapter for the city. A year later, Monroe was transformed. The streets once filled with smoke and protest now glowed with lights and music. St. Hope Church had been completely rebuilt, its glass dome reflecting the morning sun. The sign at its gate bore new words, "Where justice finds its faith." That evening, the Day of Light ceremony was held, marking exactly 1 year since the fall of the corrupt system. Helena walked slowly into the hall, her frame thinner now, but her voice still deep and steady. "Justice does not stop at a verdict," she said. "It lives in every action, every word, in every person who chooses what is right when wrong would be easier." In the crowd below, Naomi squeezed her mother's hand, her eyes glowing with pride. Marcus filmed the scene. Rosa sat in the front row taking notes, and Pastor Evelyn smiled gently, her lips moving in silent prayer. By now, the police reform program had taken full effect. The new force called the Guardian Corps trained every officer anew, teaching ethics, empathy, and how to listen instead of command. On the corner where Helena had once been attacked, citizens had raised a memorial plaque with simple words engraved. Here. The light rose. When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, but Helena remained beneath the stained glass dome. The afternoon sun streamed through the colored panels, painting her face in golden light. Pastor Evelyn stepped beside her. "You see," she said softly, "they finally believe." Helena smiled faintly. "Not in me," she replied, "but in themselves." Marcus ran up, handing her the morning paper. The headline in bold letters read, "Congress passes the National Police Transparency Act." Helena looked at the print, her eyes softening. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, tracing the faint scar on her neck. At last, she whispered, "The light has found its place." Across the square, Naomi was helping a group of students tie white ribbons to the old oak tree, a symbol of the promise never to repeat the past. When Helena approached, her daughter turned and smiled. "Mom," We did it. Helena squeezed her hand gently, her voice trembling. No, my dear, the city did it. The church bells began to ring their long, echoing tones drifting over the crowd. Sunlight filtered through the glass, cascading across the faces of those gathered below. Helena looked up, her eyes bright. No more darkness, she whispered. Justice now has a face, and it is the face of all of us. And as the bells carried their sound into the distance, and a soft wind moved through the trees, Monroe seemed to exhale. From courthouse to church, to every quiet street, people understood that it was not badges or power, but courage that had brought their city back to life. On the steps of St. Hope, Helena paused and turned to take in the view of Monroe, glowing under the evening light. Lanterns floated upward into the sky, shimmering like stars. She closed her eyes and spoke softly, not to anyone else but to herself. We are the light. And Monroe, the city that once trembled in fear, now stood tall in a new dawn where justice was no longer a dream, but the living breath of its people.